Everything changed in a matter of seconds. But if we're being completely honest, the cracks in the foundation of this historic franchise, they've been forming for a lot longer than that. Welcome to NFL Nexus. In today's explainer, we are meticulously breaking down the existential threats currently surrounding the Green Bay Packers. And we're looking at this from every conceivable angle. From the boardroom, where the team's very survival is literally being debated in the shadows, all the way down to a locker room where a severely depleted defense is just bracing for impact. The stakes? They have absolutely never been this high. Let's dive deep into this perfect storm. But real quick, before we begin this investigation, make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit that like button on this explainer, and comment your thoughts down below. The clock actually started ticking off the field first, with an unprecedented, highly adversarial statement. You rarely see the famously stoic, conservative Packers front office issue something this pointed. This was directed straight at U.S. Representative Scott Fitzgerald from Wisconsin. The franchise explicitly stated that fans everywhere should be, quote, deeply concerned and offended, pointing out that Fitzgerald basically admitted to giving zero consideration to keeping the Packers in Green Bay. Look, when an NFL front office starts deploying phrases like deeply concerned and literally calls a local politician's actions laughable, you know for a fact the stakes have escalated way beyond the gridiron. This is about the survival of the franchise itself. To truly understand why this is an existential threat to Titletown, we have to look impartially at what is unfolding right now in Washington, D.C. Lawmakers are actively questioning the Sports Broadcasting Act of 1961. Now, this is a highly specific, incredibly powerful piece of legislation that allows the NFL to legally negotiate massive national television deals as a single, unified entity, instead of forcing teams to negotiate on their own. But more importantly for Green Bay, it legally allows the league to take all that immense wealth and distribute it equally among all 32 teams. $432.6 million. Just let that massive number sink in for a second. That is the exact revenue share each team received in 2025. This single monumental payout is literally the definitive mechanism, the only lifeline that allows the smallest market in professional sports to survive and to fiercely compete with absolute financial juggernauts in New York, Los Angeles, and Dallas. Without this precise financial shield guaranteeing a completely equal distribution of broadcast wealth, the Packers simply cannot generate the local TV revenue needed to keep the playing field level. It's their economic lifeblood. So we're looking at two deeply conflicting sides of a heavily scrutinized debate here. On one side, lawmakers argue that the current model drastically inflates consumer costs. They point out the frustrating reality that you, the fan, are now forced to pay for multiple, highly fragmented streaming subscriptions, like Prime Video, Netflix, and ESPN without an ABC simulcast, just to watch your team play every week. But on the flip side, the NFL fiercely insists that this exact model protects a fundamentally fan-friendly experience. The league notes that over 87% of its games remain on free, over-the-air broadcast television, keeping the sport highly accessible compared to the massive paywalls of other major sporting leagues. So, that's the boardroom. But what about the locker room? Because if the financial foundation of Titletown is cracking in Congress, the foundation on the field is proving to be equally unstable as we enter 2026. Look closely at this group right here. This isn't just your standard coaching staff. It's practically a hit list of men who have absolutely everything to prove and nowhere left to hide. From the head coach calling the shots, all the way down to the granular position assistants. Every single name you see is entering the upcoming season operating under incredibly extreme degrees of professional pressure. Jobs, legacies, and careers, they're all entirely on the line. Think about the incredibly specific burdens these top two guys carry into the facility every single day. Head coach Matt LaFleur. Yeah, he recently got a new extension, but his job security and public trust took a massive, palpable hit late in 2025. The ghost of that devastating playoff loss to the rival Chicago Bears, it absolutely still haunts the halls of this organization. LaFleur has to prove his elite value all over again. And right beside him is the new defensive coordinator, Jonathan Gannon. Gannon shoulders the terrifying responsibility of replacing Jeff Hafley, and his singular mandate is to maximize a defense that boasts Micah Parsons as its spiritual and physical leader. But when we zoom in even closer, the intense scrutiny on the assistants is just glaring. Offensive line coach Luke Butkus is currently overseeing a severe unit regression and a really concerning lack of development from highly touted young pieces. Above him, offensive coordinator Adam Stenovich faces the huge task of fixing a run game that has inexplicably regressed. Then you've got Luke Getsy returning as quarterbacks coach, desperately seeking professional redemption after heavily criticized stints with the Raiders and Bears. And finally, Cam Accord. He is directly tasked with fixing a special teams unit that has been nothing short of a multi-year nightmare. The margin for error in this room? It has completely vanished. And all of that pressure is compounded by what's happening on the edge of the defense.
Now, before we look at exactly who has to step up to save this incredibly vulnerable unit, please consider supporting the channel by becoming an NFL Nexus member today. It really helps us keep doing these deep dives.
Okay, so everything changed in a terrifying matter of seconds when the Packers lost their ultimate closer, Micah Parsons, to a devastating torn ACL. But this wasn't just an isolated incident. It compounded a catastrophic, franchise-altering exodus of edge rushers. Rashawn Gary shipped off in a massive blockbuster trade to the Dallas Cowboys. Kingsley Enagbare, he packed his bags and signed a lucrative deal with the Jets. The depth chart wasn't just slightly dented, it was completely obliterated.
So, with the proven veterans stripped away, and the depth chart looking incredibly hollow, the entire crushing weight of the Green Bay pass rush now falls squarely onto the broad shoulders of one singular, highly unproven prospect.
It all comes down to the Lucas Van Ness gamble. Remember, the Packers moved up aggressively in the monumental Aaron Rodgers trade just to draft him, banking entirely on his raw athletic ceiling.
But so far, the potential simply hasn't matched the harsh reality of the NFL. The dichotomy here is incredibly jarring. In college at Iowa, they literally nicknamed him Hercules because he'd just toss massive linemen aside, racking up 13.5 sacks and almost 20 tackles for loss. He was a mythological figure on film. But in the pros, the reality is incredibly grim. He's spent 3 full years lingering in the shadows and is currently tied for an abysmal 140th in the NFL in sacks.
3 years, 85 combined games of defensive opportunity, and only 8.5 total sacks to show for it. Look, when an NFL organization drafts an edge defender in the top half of the first round, they are paying millions of dollars for absolute unmitigated mayhem in the backfield. And right now, they aren't getting it.
Now, to be completely fair, context is crucial here. Instead of a linear trajectory of elite development, his production has marched painfully backward due to brutal physical setbacks. 4 sacks as a rookie, then down to 3 sacks in 2024 as he bravely, but highly ineffectively, tried to play through a broken thumb. And then 2025, just 1.5 sacks in 9 games before suffering a devastating, season-ending foot injury while actively sacking Joe Flacco. That injury brutally stunted the one stretch where he was finally showing real flashes.
To put this developmental struggle into incredibly sharp perspective, look at the direct comparison with Kingsley Enagbare. Enagbare was a modest 5th-round pick, yet over the exact same 3-year time span, the unheralded 5th-rounder completely and utterly outproduced the highly touted 1st-round phenom. Enagbare perfectly matched him in total sacks and outright beat him in tackles for loss, 20-17, and in total pressures, 39-34. In the cutthroat reality of the NFL, that is a glaring, massive red flag. Yet, amid all that statistical gloom, there is a distinct, undeniable glimmer of hope. Van Ness stepped up to the mic this offseason and confidently said, "I'm feeling good, I'm feeling healthy, I'm getting back to normal again." And importantly, he actually backed those words up. By all insider accounts, he was arguably the MVP of the 2026 offseason program, absolutely dominating minicamp and creating the exact kind of terrifying havoc the front office originally envisioned. But, as we all know, the clock is relentlessly ticking toward the regular season, and spring football is just guys running around in pajamas. Until the pads go on and the real violence begins, you never truly know what you have. So we arrive at the ultimate question of this explainer. Can the Packers survive this perfect, multifaceted storm? You have severe, looming financial threats from Congress. You have an entire coaching staff operating on the bleeding edge of their job security. And you have a severely depleted defense utterly reliant on a singular young player who has yet to consistently perform, all colliding at the exact same moment. And the NFL schedule? It waits for absolutely no one. Look at this early season gauntlet. Week 1 against Kyler Murray. Week 2 against Geno Smith. Week 3 against Tua or Penix. Week 4 against Baker Mayfield. Now, last season, all of those starting quarterbacks actually finished in the bottom half of the league in passer rating. It's a highly manageable slate, but if Van Ness cannot single-handedly replace Parsons' production and generate a consistent pass rush, even this mediocre tier of quarterbacks will find the time to meticulously carve the Packers' secondary apart.
The margin for error is effectively zero. From a $432 million revenue share hanging in the legislative balance, to a head coach desperately fighting for his legacy, to a heavily scrutinized draft pick fighting to save his young career. Is this truly the beginning of the end for the mythical Titletown? The stakes have literally never been higher. Thank you for joining this NFL Nexus Explainer. We went incredibly deep today, so please don't forget to become a channel member right now to support more exhaustive deep dives exactly like this one. Subscribe to the channel, like this video, and let me know down in the comments, do the Packers find a way to weather this apocalyptic storm, or do they finally break?